Hello everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Royal Blue Podcast. My name is Joe Thomas, I'm the Echo's Everton FC correspondent. Alongside me, my colleague and season ticket holder Paul Wheelock, and we've got regular contributor Gavin Buckland. Lads, 1-1 draw against Brighton, that's what we're going to focus on first and foremost. A couple of days now after the final whistle's gone. Gav, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
Thoughts now, a point well earned,
Mm-hmm.
I think. As we spoke on this podcast, I think we were sitting in this very chair about 3 weeks ago. And the next three fixtures were Liverpool away, West Ham away, Brighton at home. And I said the thing, so I was like, if we get any points for any of them three fixtures, I'll be pleased. I think we just beaten Bournemouth. And we've taken 4 points.
Yeah.
Nearly became 6, but 4 points. And as well as qualifying for the quarterfinals of the Carabao Cup.
Not only nearly became 6, of course, but obviously controversy at Anfield.
Yeah.
Covered that well, but very, very easily could have got something from that as well.
Yeah,
so.
4 points and a decent performance at Anfield, you know. So, and qualification for the quarterfinal. So we've got to see it in that context, haven't we, really? That I think that's a decent points return. Defensively solid, which hopefully we may talk about across them games. And you've got to see it not as a standalone 90 minutes, just in the context, as I say, of 3 or 4 games where we've been on an upward trajectory, I think.
Paul, what were your thoughts when you left the stadium on Saturday?
Obviously, disappointed that the goal came when it did, because it wasn't that all the hard work was undone, but the game plan had clearly worked until that point. I think, initially, the disappointment because we've not got the 3 points what I thought the performance deserved. But as you say, probably walking down Goodison Road, going back to the car, discussed it, with my dad, listened to what other fans were saying. I'm very much like Gav. I still think it was a point gain, and I think some of the disappointments, or maybe over the top disappointment, I'd say, on social media, I felt over the weekend, would have been tempered if that goal would have come in, say, the 76th minute kind of thing. I think it was just the fact that it came late and the nature of it, the lucky or unlucky deflection from Everton's point of view. I thought there was lots to take from the performance, and as you say, a point at home to a good Brighton side on the back of 3 at West Ham and progression into the Carabao Cup quarterfinals and a good draw at home. I wasn't too downhearted at all about the performance or even the result. Yeah,
no, I largely agree as well. I think that we can talk about the 90 minutes, 94 minutes, I think it was in the end that we won, and styles of play, we'll come on to that in a minute, and whether or not Dyche could have made some changes. But I think a good place to start today is probably looking at that wider context into which it all fits in. And it's not just, as Gav, you've already mentioned, the context of the season, having 4 points, qualification, Carabao Cup, and a very unfortunate loss at Anfield within this little mini period between international breaks. But if you stretch it back wider and go to back when Brighton came to Goodison in January, the difference in Everton as a proposition to face across that 10 months couldn't really be more stark. That 4-1 defeat in January, I mean, that was probably with Newcastle, they were probably the 2 lowest points of last season, I think, on the pitch. Probably the moment where you thought Everton are back in a second relegation fight, aren't they? And the way in which they capitulated in that second half, so all those goals weren't going in the manner of the goals. There's just no fight at all, was there? And Everton were very different to that. They were clearly a different beast under Dyche. I asked Roberto De Zerbi this after the game, and he said that they're just far different team to face now. They found the style that suits them, he said, and I think that's what Dyche has done to his credit. Gav, style we'll come on to, because it has been probably one of the major talking points since the game. Did you have any issue with the tactics, and do you have any problem with the results that they're engineering? Because a lot of people have pointed out the lack of possession that Everton had, but obviously it's a positive result, very close to a very good result, and this was always going to be a contrast in styles, a conflict of completely different approaches to the game, and I think it showed that there's more than one way to be effective.
Yeah, I think there's lessons learned from the games of Brighton last season. I think we had like 50% possession at Goodison, didn't we? We got torn apart, and I think at the Amex it was about 20-odd% possession again, wasn't it, really? So Dyche not unreasonably saying, well, we'll do exactly what this did at the Amex, now slightly different at home. And also said just before we came on, I think Brighton had probably 3-4 first choice players missing on Saturday. So you playing against the week and seeing how you saw the substitutions and thought, well, actually, they're not that bad off. I understand somebody who said actually we should have done a bit more. I mean, I think it's one thing doing it against Arsenal, who are obviously one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country. Another doing it against Liverpool, but I think against Brighton at home, I'd say slightly weakened. And they've gone 4 Premier League games without a win. I think possibly you'd expect a little bit more. To be fair, I fully understand that. Yeah, we don't want to play sort of, actually go for it. But I think possibly what didn't help us, we scored too early, didn't we? I mean, I think you've always said this, Joe, haven't you, that what we've done well under Dyche is score and then just at Goodison and then hang on.
Paul, when we think about the tactical setup, and obviously Gav there mentions perhaps scoring too early might have hindered some of Dyche's ambitions. I mean, do you think the absence of Amadou Onana was also probably crucial to that as well? Because he is someone that, obviously defensively he's very capable, but he is someone that can pick up the ball on the edge of the box, drive forward with it, and increasingly we're seeing this season find a progressive pass to an Everton forward player to set off an attack, which is something that they'd struggle to do, I think, on Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think, as Gav said there, it reminded me slightly of the Arsenal game, but whereas I remember being on this podcast the Monday after that one and being really disappointed with just not having a go at all, I think. But it reminded me in times that we didn't have the ball much, and I don't think we took care of the ball enough. And I think when you appoint Sean Dyche, you do understand what kind of manager you're going to get. I worked over in that part of the country, in East Lancashire, and I remember even in the good times at Burnley, like a lot of Burnley fans were saying, why don't we have more possession of the ball? But Sean Dyche's got a style and it works well, and it was 3-4 minutes away from getting a big 3 points on Saturday. But I think in time we need better players in midfield who can hold on to the ball, and I think Onana in recent weeks has begun to show that he could become that player. Well, what I do have to say, I thought Idrissa Gueye had a really, really good game. I thought him and James Garner worked terrifically well, because they were up against some good players in their midfield, and they keep the ball so well, Brian. I thought they got through a lot of hard work. So I think they missed Onana from an attacking point of view on Saturday, but I thought defensively, absolutely no complaints about the man who came in for him. I just think, I even thought it on Burnley on Wednesday night. Strangely enough, even though we were winning 1-0 at half time, it was probably the most frustrating I've been all season, because I just thought we were poor with the ball, and fortunately Burnley just don't have that kind of lethal, like, killer clinical edge, dude. It's clear that that's really going to cost them this season. But I felt the same on Wednesday night. I think we have to get better with the ball. If we're going to only have 20, 30, 40% in games, when we've got it, we need to do more with it. And I think Sean Dyche did allude to that after the game, didn't he? He was happy with the shape, the organisation, the hard work, which was absolutely spot on throughout the game. But as Gav said, you said as well, I think we could have done more when we could.
Yeah, I think, to be fair to Dyche, I think you're right, Joe, about Onana. I think out of the 3 combinations you can have out of the 3 midfielders, the most defensive one is Garner and Gueye, isn't it? Because you lose Onana's ability to progress the ball. You both, with and without the ball, progress up the pitch. And they're 2 natural sitters, aren't they, Garner? I was thinking Garner Gueye, and I think that probably, hindered us a little bit on Saturday. And you are right, I think. You would have seen a slightly different game, I think.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see, and obviously we know that Sean Dyche was disappointed to lose him. Made this point after the Arsenal game. I think it's also a game in which you really see not having Alex Iwobi as an option, because he was, I know obviously he's somebody that divided opinion among a lot of Everton supporters, but one thing he was very effective at doing was picking up the ball on the edge of the area and again carrying it or finding a pass to Dominic Calvert-Lewin or someone out wide, quite where he'd fit into this side. I'm not entirely sure where Dyche would play him, but again, it's that probably that jarring of wanting to progress but being hampered by the realities of Everton's situation, whereby obviously they can't go out and buy a whole new midfield, or they can't go and spend big on a ball playing centre midfield, and they're working what they got. But clearly it's a choice of Dyche to play that way. I think I remember looking at the stats after 10 minutes, it was 90% Brighton possession, but by that point Everton already had a goal, and then Frutakori had another good chance as well. And I think that to some extent, Gav, I think that's probably where Everton are right now. And Everton need to make progress. The last 2 seasons have been far from acceptable. And do you think that this kind of style of play is essentially part of the necessary medicine at the minute? All right, some supporters, and by all means not all, some supporters might not perhaps enjoy watching as much as possible, but you can't go from 4th from bottom last season to 7th this season, and within that encompass a complete change in the way in which you play football as well. You've got to find the easiest way to be effective, and this is what Dyche has stumbled across.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say progress. I mean, we've got to stop the rot phase,
That's
it. Then we've got to progress, and I think we've clearly stopped the rot. He spoke about the low points of last season, and that, you like to think that would be, that we've moved away from that, and we are now progressing to a limited degree. I think is that maybe. He's only got a very small squad. We've spoken about this, haven't we? So he's looking at the squad and saying, what's the best style of play for this team? So you've got Mikalenko, we know he's a fullback, excellent on Saturday, but he's got a certain style, hasn't he? He's very solid defensively. You've got Ashley Young, who's 38 on the other flank, who can't get up and down. As I say, sometimes in midfield, you haven't got anybody who can run with the ball. And so I think you find in a style that suits those 11 to 12 first choice players, and he's found it, hasn't he, really? But having said that, should we be doing more? Possibly, but I think also after the moment is points, isn't it?
Yeah,
that is all we're after is keeping the relegation, door, keeping away from the relegation door, and I think we're doing that. We're now 4 points ahead. Even though in some respects the results, some of the results went against us, didn't they, at the weekend? And I think that as long as we're getting results, perfectly fine. I think possibly where we've missed something is in midfield. We didn't replace Tom Davies, did we?
No.
To give us another option in midfield during the summer. That was a calculated risk. That was probably based on the finances, really. And
Davies did get offered a new contract and turned it down.
Yeah. But we chose not to. Not to replace him. So we've lost a body in midfield. We could have had somebody on the bench. In a perfect world.
That was notable as well. Again, just as a reminder, perhaps, as to how limited Dyche's options are. Obviously, Onana's absence through the calf injury meant there was no senior centre midfielder on the bench, was there?
Yeah, exactly, and that informed the thinking about not bringing anybody on. But that was a conscious decision by the club and forced on them by financial circumstances. So I'm quite happy to do what we're doing at the moment. So as long as it brings points, and has been doing for 5 games, possibly something like that. I've not got a problem with that, and we have shown, haven't we, certainly away from home, we can be expansive. We played really well at Brentford, didn't we? West Ham, we were after a so slow first half, second, we came into the game there. So it's not as if we're parking 2 buses every game, isn't it? It's just got to pick your moments, haven't you, to do it. And I thought Saturday probably should have done a bit more, but we still got a point. And that's perfectly acceptable for me as part of that run of, as I say, 4 points from 3 difficult games, and extend that to the Brentford game. Was it 10 and 5, something like that? That's not bad, is it? No,
it's quite interesting. Remember when Lampard tried to have his summer rebuild, one of the first things he identified was saying, I want to start from the back and building that stability and solidity at the back. And obviously it never quite worked out, but one thing that we are seeing with this Dyche side is it's very effective at the back, just like against Liverpool, against Brighton, a very good attacking side. They weren't really creating much, weren't they? And there's that Coaching Voices interview that Dyche does about his win at Anfield with Burnley during COVID. He talks about protecting that V from almost the goalpost out towards the edge of the box, and they do that so effectively, don't they? It's clearly, again, just like the willingness to concede possession, the willingness to concede the ball out wide, so long as they can protect and crowd those areas in the middle. It's proven effective, because you look at all that talent that they've got in that Brighton side, and they didn't really carve Everton open, and that was even after. Again, we've already talked about squads issues for Everton. Again, you want to try and compare where these clubs are at the moment. Obviously, Brighton brought on Ansu Fati. They brought on Mahmoud Dahoud, who I thought was excellent when he came on, and João Pedro, with half an hour to go, and really did give him a bit of impetus. But again, they're bringing them 3 players on. They've already got 3 first-team players out injured, and they're playing against a team in Everton, and obviously this isn't acceptable, but it is where the club is at the moment. Can't name a senior centre midfielder on the bench.
Well, I don't know if we'll go on to subs, but it kind of probably links into what I was saying. I can actually understand. Again, I think Dyche has already made it clear that if he thinks something's working on the pitch and the players are fit, he's not going to change it. That's his management style. I think it was his management style at Burnley before it. I actually thought on Saturday I could understand maybe Harrison to come off and they maybe could put Patterson at right back and Young but it was going well, and it comes back to your point there, Joe. Apart from the free kick that Pickford made that great save from, I can't remember Brighton having a chance in open play, and that was even after they threw the cavalry or something. 5 subs. Like you could tell by the sub, they're taking Milner off. They were playing players out of position. The first choice for left back is off, but De Zerbi was trying different things in that game, and we can't get away from the fact that it's taken a really, fortuitous goal to eventually, to get Brighton back in the game and peg Everton back. So I think that's credit to what Dyche is doing at the moment, because Gaz rightly says it's a tricky one on Saturday, because you look, one player goes out of the squad in Onana, and then you kind of go, my God, we've gone over central midfield options, and then is it again? You look at the bench and you think, Beto could come on for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but Calvert-Lewin's looking so strong at the moment. But he played really well again on Saturday. There was no need to take him off. And then it's Danjuma, and I think he's probably the one player in that squad who is probably not getting as much game time as he would have imagined. But you kind of get the impression that Dyche doesn't fully trust him, in certain games like that. So,
I can understand fresh legs would have helped, but I can understand why he wouldn't have brought Danjuma on for Harrison in those closing stages. Probably should have made it. It's easy to say this with hindsight. I mean, the obvious thing would have been to bring Patterson on, I think, and then either put Patterson at right back and move Ashley Young, or have Patterson on the right of midfield and just fresh legs in defensive duties, wouldn't it? I think.
I've not been bowled over by Ashley Young, and I think you've always got to remember that he's a 38-year-old free transfer who's had a brilliant career, so we can't expect him to be bombing up and down the wing. But I thought that was probably one of his best games for us on Saturday. Mitoma's an excellent player. He got behind him once in the first half, and then unfortunately got past him and Harrison for the goal. But I thought Young did really well on Saturday. So again, maybe I've got my glass half full today. I could understand Dyche's decisions on Saturday. Again, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Maybe he should have brought Patterson on a little bit earlier, but on another day, that cross deflection to Pickford's arms, and it finishes 1-0.
Yeah, I think they had a bit more space. Mitoma didn't in the second half. I think it might be only something mad, which I think mad theory, but there's an element of truth in it. I think I was listening to Gary Neville the other week talking about playing fullback, and when he plays right back to Gary Neville, and he said that when you're a fullback by the dugout, you always push tighter because you've got the coach and the managers on you all the time, and if you've got somebody who's covering for you, your right winger, they will always cover for you, because you'd imagine you've got Dyche and whoever screaming at you for the touchline if the opposition winger's a threat. He said at Old Trafford he always found that playing by the dugout, they were always tight against the winger. He said but when you went over the far side of the pitch, there was always far more space for the winger, because you haven't got somebody down your ear the whole game. And I was thinking about that on Saturday. I know it's a mad theory, but I think there's an element of truth in that. And it was noticeable in the second half that Mitoma I think he had a bit more space. But I don't know whether that comes into it. It's just something that sprung to mind on Saturday watching the game. And I thought maybe Harrison didn't do enough, I think, possibly in the second half. We closed Mitoma down, doubled up on him in the first half. Second half, I think he had more space. But I think that he picked him out quite a couple of times.
I was really impressed with him.
But I thought Young did okay. I thought he was unlucky with the goal. Now, what would you say about Pickford with the goal, by the way?
It's just really unfortunate, I was going to say. I feel like you're smiling, like playing devil's advocate.
I was just thinking, I've heard various theories, whether actually should have got it. I thought you're not expecting that.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I was listening to that well-known goalkeeper Martin Keown on Match of the Day on Saturday saying he should have gone with his other arm. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you think Everton should have had a penalty? I mean, there was a few different shouts. I think I wasn't aware of this in the stadium. It sounds like VAR checked the Dwight McNeil one and said the contact was outside the box. Yeah. And then obviously there were two potential chance. Only showed one on match today, didn't they? But it was Van Hecke on Calvert-Lewin and then Veltman on Tarkowski, both wrapped around them.
Yeah, I think McNeil's foot was in the box, wasn't it? But the contact was outside, so I think the other ones were... I'm not really sure I'd be happy if it had been the opposite.
Yeah, I think given how close the offside was for Lewis Dunk's goal as well, I think probably come away from the not complaining about officiating from as vociferously as perhaps have deserved to in some recent games. I mean, that Dunk goal was a lovely goal, wasn't it? I mean, we can say that now that it didn't count, but I mean, he finished that off well. But although it does point to, again, I think, like personally, and this was the theme of my report after and reporting on the game after, I think that there were positives and signs of progress from the Brighton game when you look at everything in proper context. And I think it shows that Everton are moving forward on an upward trajectory. It might be slow, it might be gradually, it might be, there will be setbacks along the way, but it feels like this is the necessary part of sustainable progress that the club needs. I do think there are probably a couple of areas where Dyche is probably going to have to concede on a little bit and perhaps be a little less, I don't know, either a little less stubborn or a little bit more innovative. One of them, go back to that Dunk goal, to see the opposition's most dangerous attacking threat from a set piece charge into the box unmarked to meet across so soon after it happened so often against Luton, and it just keeps happening this season. And I feel like that's something that can't be allowed to carry on going. I don't quite know what the thought process is there, Gavin. I mean, it's as a fan, and obviously following football is increasingly about looking at tactics and finances and not just watching the 90 minutes these days. But it is quite difficult to see what the thought process is in allowing that, isn't it?
I thought being a fan just looked at finances all the time. and football's just like an optional extra,
I was 1-0 with 7 minutes to go, and looking at the mid-table, I was thinking, oh wow, this could be a couple of months here where we can just talk about football. Obviously, we've got 777 and all the takeover stuff as well, and that. But I mean,
I think you're right. I mean, that was my first reaction. I remember when we did the pod, the Luton goal, saying what was the Luton striker? What's his name?
Morris. Carlton Morris, wasn't it?
Thinking that's the only goal you'll see scored under pressure this season.
Wasn't it, Saturday?
And that was my first reaction when Dunk scored. Let's just have it again. And it's good. It's all about communication, isn't it, between you, between your backline for the start. But it is something that needs working on. There was a couple of times in the second half, I think Dunk was marked by Ashley Young at one stage, I think you'd expect better from a Dyche team, to be fair. We got away with that. And it's always better than those goals when they hit the bar, don't they?
I can say, you can say now, it's a lovely goal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he had the fortunate first half, didn't he? Because it went in off and the goal he got booked, and he had the goal disallowed by half a centimetre. But you'd expect it from a Dyche team. That's something that they should be working on, especially as it's sort of out of kilter with the general defensive progression we've shown over the last 5 or 6 weeks.
I think another area that he's probably going, obviously we touched on it, and again this is one of the main talk points after the game, is substitutions. I asked him a lot about this towards the back end of last season, and it's very clear, and you look back at his Burnley days, that he doesn't like to make substitutions when he thinks things are going okay. But I really do think that that's probably something that he's going to have to change his approach on, because I think the game has changed so much in the past 18 months. The fact that you can now have 5 substitutions rather than 3. The fact the game's going on regularly 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes longer. The fact that so many of the Premier League squads now have got a strong 15, 16 as opposed to a strong 11, 12. You're essentially looking at games being compartmentalised into 2 or 3 different phases. And I think Dyche spoke about this last week, about trying to, working longer on training sessions at Finch Farm, things like that, to try and encompass the additional fitness that's needed in the first 11 to do that. But I do think that's probably going to be a little bit naive going forward, because like we saw against Brighton, obviously they didn't create any real chances in the second half, and the equaliser came from a deflected cross. But it was easy to see the impetus and the injection of momentum that happened when they brought those 3 players on midway through the second half. And obviously Everton were tired. It's even more obvious when you've got people like Ashley Young is he's 38, isn't he? Of course, like as we mentioned, some of these players were playing 3 times in a week. It's a lot to ask of players to be able to do that, maintain the intensity, particularly when it's a Dyche side that doesn't like it doesn't put a lot of emphasis on having possession. If you're asking your players to defend, but defend with the intensity of the Dyche side for 95, 96, 97 minutes against the first wave for 60 and a second wave for the next 30, and then maybe some final substitutions, that's a hell of a lot to ask for, isn't it?
Yeah, it kind of. I agree. I think he's definitely loath to make subs, and there's been a few times this season when we've come away from games thinking, why haven't you changed it? It kind of comes down to me, it's the options off the bench, even though we had 9 subs on Saturday, 2 of them goalkeepers. Unless you were going to bring a Michael Keane on and go to a back 5, the only sub you could see come in was Beto for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But as I said earlier, Dominic Calvert-Lewin didn't look like he was having any ill effects, seemed completely fit. And then it probably was the Patterson one, either directly for Young or on for Harrison, who I thought didn't have the best of the games on Saturday, and I wasn't overly impressed with it on Wednesday either, even though I know he worked very hard, and he worked very hard again on Saturday, and I think that's why Dyche likes him more than, say, Dan Juma. And I think you mentioned him earlier, it's I still think we are, I don't know, it's easy for me to say this given the club's financial situation, I still think we're 1 centre midfielder down, I think we're another winger down. I think there are days like that where you really feel it. As I said earlier, I have some sympathy for Dyche on Saturday when it comes to the subs, but you're right, Joe. You look at, say, the Luton game, luckily in recent weeks, he's been able to make subs or maybe 1 or 2 late changes for a position of strength, hasn't he? It's what's going to happen if we were losing 1-0 on Saturday. I think I'd be interested to see what happens then. I think once you're 1 up at home or 1 up away at West Ham, you can stick at it, can't you? But there will come a time where we'll probably 1 down at home and we're going to have to change it, and he's going to have to change his shape. And it'd be interesting to see what happens when that comes.
Yeah, I think because it hurts you 2 ways, doesn't it? It's the in-game stuff you're talking about there, Joe, but it also means that people start more games, aren't they, than what you would expect. And I'm just thinking for December, when there's 8 games in December. We saw before, that's going to be a real pinch point, isn't it, for the squad, isn't it? Where it's not going to be necessarily not being able to substitute players during the game. It's going to be like the case that I'm playing so-and-so on Saturday, but I know he's got a bit of a knock, and in normal circumstances I'd probably drop him to the bench or not play him at all, but I'm going to be forced to play because I haven't got any other options. And that's where it's going to bite us, I think. The starting of players in matches that are within in other circumstances you may not have done so, and I think that, especially given our fixture list in December, I think that's going to be where it's also going to hurt, so not just the in-game stuff.
Yeah, December's going to be absolutely massive, isn't it? That's why it's crucial to have that. There is a bit of a buffer to the relegation zone at the moment. Obviously, Forest picked up the win yesterday, which meant that they leapt over Everton. Luton conceded a late equaliser to Liverpool, of course, which is probably helpful. But and again, I think this is when we try and interpret what's going on in where Everton are right now. I think it's the important context. It's just looking at some of those teams beneath Everton and just how they're continuing to struggle. Burnley lost again at home. Bournemouth obviously battered by Manchester City. I don't think Everton can be naive and assume that that's going to carry on all season. Both of those clubs have had relatively new investment, and you would think both managers must be close to. I know they like Vincent Kompany a lot, and obviously Raiola had a lot of fanfare around him when he was appointed the Bournemouth manager. But you'd think that those hierarchies must be somewhere near a change. You'd also think that they might be looking at January and might have a bit of money to try and make sure they stay in the Premier League. But for the time being, Everton, in a relatively healthy position, aren't they, compared to where they have been in recency? But the important thing is they continue to build on that, isn't it? Obviously, Palace away on site is going to be a really interesting one for that, isn't it?
Battle for 10th place is now Bobby behind Palace, 3 points behind Palace or something like that.
Something like that,
yeah. Eminently winnable game, isn't it?
Yeah.
On Saturday. Palace, I think, I'm not sure about. They always appear to more likely to win away from home than at home. I'm not sure what the stats are. But yeah, it's one of them games where you would expect a little bit more than what we'd shown against Brighton to be fair. I'd expect it to set up the same way, but I'd expect at the same time,
I think when we think about style as well, like, obviously there are things that we probably expect to change as the season goes on, perhaps Dyche's use of substitutions being one of them. One of the things I'd be really interested to see from a tactical point of view is if Everton do consolidate and stabilise and make a bit of progress this season, it'd be interesting to see how whether or not Dyche continues with the same tactics as Everton, get stronger and better and make progress, and whether or not he can adapt a better side that gets stronger and stronger to tactics that perhaps some people might say are more appealing on the eye, or whether it's this again, isn't it? Obviously we saw what he did with Burnley. He'd made the argument that obviously he had very limited resources at all stages of Burnley, wouldn't he? So, but I feel like that's a question for another day really, as opposed to now it's first and foremost.
But it still points to our lack of options, isn't it? I mean,
exactly.
I mean, modern football is a lot of your progression, your attacking play comes from out wide from your two fullbacks, doesn't it? Really, and we've got Young, Young is 38, as I say, Mikalenko, excellent defensively, maybe a centre back in time. I said that just saying he's not great going forward. He scored on Saturday, but that we don't have those options. It's a bit like Brighton, where Estupiñán, whatever his name is, didn't play. Estupiñán didn't play on Saturday. And you had Milner, who's a 37-year-old right back playing left back. Completely different setup then, isn't it? And that's where we are missing. When you talk about changing the play, well, if you got two relatively defensive fullbacks, then that takes an important bit of your armoury out going forward in modern football. And so, therefore, you're looking at creativity through the middle, then, aren't you?
Yeah.
And we got what creativity we got through the middle. Anana can do stuff. Yeah. I think James Garner can do stuff. But we haven't got anything else apart from that, have we?
Yeah, well, you've got Decore, whose creativity is very much physical, technical, haven't you?
So we haven't got. I suppose what you'd say there is where you would expect us to play is maybe 10 yards further up the pitch. Is plant ourselves closest to the halfway line, and our own penalty box would be a start. Yeah. And then take it from there. But he's only got limited options. Yeah. In terms of changing the style of the team and making them more progressive. Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, just mentioned Decore there. Signed a new contract last week. Connor, our colleague, spoke to him after the game on Saturday. One of the things he said, I wrote this a few weeks ago, saying that it looked like that'd be the case, but almost certainly looks now, Paul, like he's not going to go to the Africa Cup of Nations with Mali. That's a significant boost for Dyche, I think, isn't it? Because within the limited setup and obviously within the style of football that Dyche chooses to play, I mean, Decore really is integral, the way he kind of bursts from that midfield role to press or to attack, and some of his goals have been crucial. I think the prospect of having that difficult December and entering a January where Everton might be without two of the four centre midfielders they've got. I mean, if Idris Gueye and Abdoulaye Decore had both gone, that would force a tactical rethink, wouldn't it? As good as Onana and Garner have looked in recent weeks, and James Garner have looked in recent weeks, I think Dyche will welcome the fact that he'd probably be able to stick with the same tactics going forward to that month. Yeah, he's become such a key player, hasn't he? Yeah. Sean Dyche, not just in his goals, his work rate off the ball. And if we're going to be a side who gives up, 80, 70, 60% of the possession to opposition, you're going to need fit players off the ball who are going to chase it down, get back into shape, and that's what Decore gives us in abundance. And I think we even saw it against Burnley on Wednesday night. I thought we were a better side when he came on. Yeah. And as you said, he was key last season, wasn't he? After he got sent off against Tottenham, did we go 3 games without and win after he was out the side suspended? I think so. It was Fulham, it was Palace. I can't remember. Man United, wasn't it? Didn't play against Man United. I'm not sure. You look at the options. I thought, as Connor said in his analysis after Burnley, I think it was a missed opportunity from Danjuma, wasn't it? I don't think he took his chance on Wednesday night. I'm not sure he's a number 10. Obviously, Dele Alli, that would be his position, but from the sounds of things, he's still quite a while away from. Yeah, I mean, that's one other thing that might help Dyche moving forward. Obviously, you've got Andre Gomez and you've got Dele as well, who could have an impact. But obviously, both of them are long-term injury absences, and I don't think you could rely on them to come in and have a big impact. The hope is that they would do, but I think anything's a bonus really, given where they've been for the last 18 months. It seems a long way off, doesn't it? But
you hope the takeover would go through in time for New Year, and you'd hope in some way that the squad can be strengthened, because, as you both said rightly, I don't think it's probably too much of a guess to suggest if we are playing 8 games in December going into January, we're probably going to have a few injuries.
Yeah, I think obviously that's something that is just as you kind of start to reach a plateau where, albeit we could argue over style and substitutions, the headlines of what's going on the pitch at the moment are going in the right direction. I think they're largely positive. Obviously, this being Everton Football Club, there's always something in the background, and we await for the mysterious day when the Premier League are going to upload their judgment on and potentially a punishment on their website over the financial allegations. Believe me, I've asked them several times for some sort of timeline. That it basically is, it will come when it comes, so just be prepared. And then obviously there's also the takeover stuff as well, which needs to have full scrutiny.
Back onto finance again.
We're back onto finance.
I think that the Corey thing's fascinating, by the way. I think there's a few things about it. The first thing is, I would imagine his decision to go or not to go to the African Cup of Nations was probably part of the contractual negotiations.
Yeah.
We'll give you a 2-year extension, Abdullah, but you're not going to go to the African Cup of Nations, are you? And also, it's quite a surprise. I'm trying to think of any precedents where somebody's been on a 1-year contract and then you've extended it. It's 2, is it?
It's to summer 25.
So, so he's got.
So he was already contracted till next summer, so it's essentially a 1-year extension.
I think that's. Bear in mind, last year we extended it at the end of the season, and this year we've done it even before. And I'm the only thing I'm saying about there is there's 2 things, isn't it? And it does tie into what you just said there. The first thing is whether I actually think needs to preserve his value, because given his performance over the last 10 months, midfielders who can score goals are quite coveted, aren't they? I think that comes into it. Whether there's been interest shown him in already, and that actually, I've only got a few months left. Somebody comes in January for them, maybe they want to sort of head that off as well. And also as well, then this is to do with the profitability and sustainability thing. Do you think the club will protect themselves in case we get a transfer ban?
Yeah, I think that probably also comes into the thought process, because there are a significant number of players that are out of contract next summer. So if, for instance, Everton were to be found guilty of a breach, a transfer ban that took in January and next summer would have a serious impact, I think, on this squad. Even, and I think, again, we've spoken about a lot of positives here, so the last thing we'll do is get drawn into, potential nightmares for a year's time or whatever. But when you look at the sides that might come up from the Championship next season, Leicester, although they lost the other day, look very, very strong. Leeds are in the mix. Southampton are in the mix already. I know Ipswich are as well. But it feels like Everton are in a fortunate position this season where enough will be less than it has been. Doing enough will have a lower threshold than what's been required over the last 2 years because of the weakness of the teams that have come up. That looks like that's probably not going to be the case next season. So if you're in a situation next summer where Everton have so many players going out of contract and they either don't have the finances or they don't have the ability because of a transfer ban to improve their squad, the next season could be very difficult when you have 3 clubs come up with fresh momentum, squads that are largely Premier League squads, and obviously with probably a bit of money to spend as well. A transfer ban would be a serious concern, and therefore something like Abdullah Doucouré, signing on for a new deal would make sense just to protect the asset a little bit.
The Premier League next season could be stronger than what it was last season. Even. I'm just wondering whether there's been a conversation between the Premier League and Everton already about the decision. Sometimes they have to hear and they say, well, this is what you don't know. It may be that what the detection is, the mood music is pointing towards a transfer ban rather than a points deduction, and maybe that's informing some of the. And that's just me speculating. I don't know.
Yeah, the mood music, obviously, the week before last was pointing towards a points deduction if something found. But I don't know is the honest answer on that. But I think that Everton, we've perhaps been critical of them for not protecting themselves against predictable problems of the future over recent years, it would make sense for a lot of reasons, even if they're in complete dark about what's happening with this case, which most of the club probably will be, to protect themselves against potential outcomes of this case, and signing Decore for another season. It will cost a lot of money. It'll cost a lot more money to find someone to come in and do the job that Decore does than it would be to pay him for another year. I think that's interesting. So.
Yeah, and somebody's got to learn the ropes at Everton. You've got somebody who knows what Everton's about, haven't you, really, as well? So there's that, isn't it? Yeah. I just thought it was a quite fascinating development, really, quite unusual. In terms of a player, in terms of the timing of it, but. It makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons, really.
Yeah, I mean, the Jared Branthwaite one's interesting as well, because as brilliant as he's been, he was excellent again on Saturday. Obviously, he was a player that was still under a long-term contract at Everton, and it's very difficult to imagine that he wouldn't have got a significant pay rise in his new deal, which again perhaps offers a little bit more insight into where Everton's finances are right now than we perhaps get from any other source, because if things are as tight as they're claimed in some quarters, it's a new contract that didn't need to be given for a while. Obviously, psychologically, Everton will be in a strong position in January should someone come in and they've got him on new terms and he's happier at the club. But in terms of the length of his deal, Everton still held all the cards without having to potentially give him extra money. So that's also quite interesting. Be interested to think as well what happens with Dominic Calvert-Lewin going forward as well. I mean, 7 straight starts. I think he's 25.
18 months left.
So he's got 18 months left. And again, trying to find someone. It'd be very expensive to buy someone that does even a fraction of what he can do. So
would you, if he shows his fitness between now and Christmas, so that means he'd probably play 15 games on the spin by Christmas, do you think to be interested in him in January?
I think so, possibly. I think there are a lot of
teams you need centre forwards.
I think there are a lot of
that league.
Yeah, that's right. I think there are a lot of clubs in the Premier League, including at the very top of the Premier League, that would benefit from having him, even as a squad player. Which is probably something that if he had the opportunity to go and play Champions League football, so even as a squad player, then you think
Arsenal
before, haven't they?
Arsenal. I mean, Chelsea is struggling to score goals at the moment. I mean, Manchester United obviously just spent big on Hoyle. There's you would think that if you're a Premier League player with cash, a Premier League club with cash in your pocket, he might be a proven. A proven option that might not come at a massive price. I also think, obviously, we're getting into realms of football manager and speculation territory here as well. But I also think the Jared Branthwaite situation will be interesting, depending on where Everton sit in terms of things like whether a takeover has been approved or not, and what the financial situation of the takeover is. Because come January, if Everton were to be taken over, there's one thing that could happen is the club could get generally more stable as time goes on, particularly if they consolidate in the Premier League this season. So you'd think it would only, as that would happen, Jared Branthwaite would only get more and more expensive. And again, there are a lot of very good and very rich clubs that will be looking at Jared Branthwaite and thinking, a centre-back, an English centre-back of his age, with his experience already and what he's shown across different leagues, and with the ability to play with his left foot like he does have, there'll be a lot of clubs, I should think, that will look at him and think he's almost like a franchise signing in NFL terms. He's someone you could do it for 10 years, and January would probably be the cheapest time to get him, albeit he wouldn't be cheap. It's interesting that Dyche said that he made it a red line not to sell Branthwaite over the summer. Which is interesting, but I find, again, this is speculation, but I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see the dynamics at play in January, where you potentially end up with an Everton coming out of a very difficult period and potentially on the cusp of getting stronger and consolidating, and whether some clubs see it as an opportunity, as a last opportunity to try and come to the club and get essentially proven players at bargain costs.
Yeah, it depends where we are on the table as well in January, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it'd just be interesting if you speculating again, if we did have new owners in January, would it be wise in terms of core popularity with the fan base selling your assets off, and that's the other thing that plays into it, isn't it? That's for another day.
I think rightly those owners face a lot of scrutiny.
Anyway, there's lots of hurdles to go. But either way, it's an issue. I think it's a good point you raised. Given the noise that word again round the club, is January could be the option. Last time you get an opportunity to buy an Everton player cheaper than the
That's
market value.
that's kind of where I'm going.
I think
and
that's a really good point.
And that's something
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
kind of, I think with Branthwaite, Onana and Calvert-Lewin are probably the three, where it's a case of, it might cost them 30, 40, 50 million now, but there might be clubs that go, well, we know we're going to need that, and we'd rather pay that now than 80, 90,
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
couple of months. So, yeah.
I think it was a smart move, wasn't it, to get Branthwaite down, because I think the secret's out now, and I think there's a body of work to suggest that it's not promised. There's real quality there, isn't there? And I think we've seen it in the last 2 weekends against the really wily campaigner in Antonio, and then Ferguson, who I think is absolutely exceptional.
It's battle of two of the hottest prospects in
Yeah.
European football, I think, and it's one the
I
Branthwaite
thought he
won.
was absolutely brilliant, and I think people will come knocking on our door probably in January for him, certainly next summer, because as you rightly said, Joe, you don't get many left-sided centre-backs, let alone one who's right-footed.
Yeah.
But he's so comfortable off both feet. That's huge.
I think we're in danger of kind of drifting into sleepover meanderings or fourth or fifth pint discussions.
Well, that's the problem with that, yeah. I just point out, because no flex trade, we're not saying we should sell players here. We're just saying what we're saying is we've got quite a few saleable assets at the moment, which is a good reflection of where we develop.
We're trying to gain the situation so in 4 months' time, when some of these things might happen, we can go, well,
Yeah, we told you,
that's why you should
absolutely.
listen to Royal Play. Thanks very much for joining us. We will be, of course, be back again later this week previewing all things Crystal Palace. We've been the Royal Blue Podcast. Have a wonderful week. Thanks for joining us.